So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pratejas, and today I welcome you everyone to this very special panel discussion on the need to develop efficient private defense/slash aerospace firms in India. And I'm being joined by a very eminent panel, starting off with Professor Vinod Saxena, who has served for more than 4 decades at HAL and is currently serving as a quality manager at Indira Gandhi Rashtrodan Academy on part-time basis. Then we have Lieutenant Colonel Prashant Mishra, who is a retired army personnel, and he has given in a number of uh, great contributions to army when it comes to engineering field. And then finally we have CV Krishnan, who is a defense analyst and a mechanical engineer. We are also being joined by Abhivardhan, who is the president of Global Law Assembly. Now, I would like the panelists to give their views on the current state of defense sector in India, especially when it comes to the various aerospace firms that we have. Starting off with Professor Vinod Saxena.
Well, if we talk about defense sector, then in fact I have got 2 points to make. One is, as far as defense sector is concerned, it's a huge sector and it depends upon what is it that we are looking at and how we are looking at. What I am trying to say is that, say for example, we have got the, whether we are looking at manufacturing alone or we are looking at design, development, and industrial research, the comments will vary or the assessment will vary. Similarly, when we talk about the defense sector, whether we are talking about the first line of equipment or our systems or the equipment that goes into those systems and further subsystems, etc. Because if we see, for example, if we take one by one, that we have got, whether for army or for navy or for air force, if we talk about the manufacturing sector, then it is inefficient, but it is reasonably robust. We are manufacturing the latest guns, say for example Bofors in India. We are making frigates and even submarines for navy, and we are manufacturing aircraft for air force. But when we go into the second and third tier, then the situation varies. So during the discussions, we will see that how each of these sectors are varying and how they vary with respect to the manufacturing. And when it comes to design, development, and say research, because a weapon system is no good if your counterpart on the other side is having better equipment. So that problem and that challenge always remains. So this is as far as defense sector in general is concerned. Now coming to specifically the aerospace industry, I would like to bring a fact that is there. In late 50s, two nations decided to design, develop, and manufacture the supersonic aircraft. One was France. They declared Mirage 3 program. And second was India, which came up with HF-24 program. That was nearly the end of the, say, 50s. Both these aircraft, they made their maiden flight in early 60s within a span of 1 year itself, both Mirage 3 as well as HF-24. Now, where we are now, we know. In fact, it signifies two important aspects to as far as the defense sector is concerned, as far as the aerospace sector is concerned. India took a bold step, and it could take the bold step because it followed the route depending upon what was its capability. There was no private sector which could have taken this bold step. And it was only because of HAL, the public sector, and the support from the government that it could be started. However, when it comes to the present situation, we all know where France is and where we are as regards to the manufacturing or design or development of the aircraft systems. Unfortunately, this again is due to the fact that we chose the PSU system or the public sector, and the France chose the private sector. So, I mean, there is a mixed kind of a thing. We could take it up in 50s when we were not designing even a bicycle. And we could take it up only because of the, say, public sector being roped in and government pumping in the necessary resources. So, this is what, in fact, are the two things that I would like to say. We all know where the sector is today, and we will discuss more about it as we go about.
Very well said, Professor Saxena. And now moving on to Lieutenant Colonel Mishra.
Good evening to all the panelists and the organizers. Thanks for giving this opportunity. Carrying on from where Professor Vinod Saxena has said, the public sector has had a very major role to play. And what I would say is that as our old chief during the parliament attack, General Padmanabhan used to say, we will change the way we change. So there is no need in case of the army, when we go for training, we are taught one thing, that when you're running a cross country, you go with your own pace. Don't ever try to match your pace with somebody else. You will fall down. You will not even be able to achieve what you are trying to achieve, and you will land up maybe not finishing the race itself. So every nation has got its own pace, its rhythm, and the way it progresses. Now, we took a very early step of establishing a very vibrant public sector, and we are very happy to, in fact, state that some of the best of the achievements and world standard achievements have been achieved by the public sector. For example, in case of the LCA, I don't know, Professor Vinod will be better person to qualify it, but there has not been even one accident. There is no aircraft industry in the world today that has done a aircraft without an accident. So if we change the way we change, we will reach where we want to reach. But if we try and rapid and try to follow somebody else, we will not be able to reach anywhere. And that is what is hampering our reforms. So let's say there is a public sector, there's a vibrant public sector, and suddenly you want to stop it. No, that is not the way forward. There is a private sector, and the private sector is trying to emerge, and there are thousands of startups, MSMEs, and even large companies like Tatas and Mahindras and all that. And I had the opportunity of working on both sides. So when I got out of the army, I had some view of the public and private sector, and that view was, I would say, changed 180 degrees when I actually started serving in one. And Bharat Electronics was my first company when I stepped out of the army. and they were doing magnificent. They were 5,000 crore company at that point of time, and within next 2 years they were reaching around 8 to 9,000 crores, similar to HL. And at that point of time, LCA program was still far from finishing. But what I would say is that watching the LCA program and the way it has come out, it's something that we should actually be stating very, very voraciously when we are talking about the need to what is required to be done for public and private sector defense industry in India. What else I want to tell about, or rather, as the discussion progresses, what we would want to discuss and want from the panelists, the other panelists, is that is speed the essence? Like, for example, Professor pointed out that there is a machine, and but the core components inside that machine are imported. So, like we have the LCA, but the engine we have not. The Kaveri engine has not progressed. We have the Bofors gun, but the design and everything is still foreign. We have made our own guns, and we have been struggling to make them in the quantities required. Still, a large part of the technologies are coming from somewhere else. Uh, Not all the guns, but yes, few of the guns. The large part of technology, a small thing like small arms, we are importing from outside. So there is something required to be done, but what is that something is very important to be identified. As a part of this panel, I would request that at the end of it, what is the exact thing required to be done to the private public players, and what kind of a relationship should exist between the private public player? That thing we have to come out at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Mishra, and hopefully we'll be able to reach to that point by the time we finish this panel. Now, moving on to CV Krishnan, sir. He can share his views.
Sure. Can you hear me clearly? Hello?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yes,
Please go
absolutely,
ahead.
sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
it's audible. Yes, it is
Yeah.
audible. You can
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. Just for the sake of my current internet speed, I'd like to switch off my video for the time being before my internet improves, if you don't mind. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and it's really like it's a privilege to be part of a panel with stalwarts like Lieutenant Colonel Mishra and Professor Vinod Saxena, and it's a nice platform that Abhivardhan and Pratajesh you have set up. Coming to the topic, and I completely agree with what Professor Saxena and Colonel Mishra had said. The public sector had definitely a huge role to play, and I think there are a lot of positives with regards to the public sector system playing to the needs of our armed forces. But what we have seen is that inefficiencies and organizational misincentives or disincentives, and then lack of planning and a lack of focus has in the recent decades led to our military industrial complex, if we could call it that, having gone astray without any direction. The LCA program is one of the, I would say, one of the exceptions to it, because there have been more focus on it, both the DRDO DPSU system as well as the politicians have made sure that the focus has been brought back to make the LCA a success. But as Professor Saxena and Colonel Mishra had mentioned, we had made significant progress with regards to our manufacturing ecosystem, but we still depend a lot on the underlying technology as well as the design. and that is something which I feel like decades of license manufacturing and technology transfer has really not helped us where we would really want us to be. And it is not completely the mistake of the public sector system, but it has a significant part to do with what we have done with regards to technology absorption from our side. We may be able to have access to designs, right? But what are we doing about it after we manufacture them to the design? What are we learning from the design? What are we learning from the manufacturing? Is there much learning? Is there a push from the government for us to do much learning? Are there enough incentives in the public sector to do such a learning, and for individuals and organization like teams within the public sector to take the initiative and do such things? Or will such initiatives be better done by the private sector if given the right incentives? Those are the questions that we need to look at. When it comes to efficiency, I personally feel the private sector has a lot to give in terms of giving a very efficient ecosystem. But the private sector will almost always be driven by incentives. So, how do we balance between providing a stable ecosystem, which can be done by the public sector, and a competitive and efficient supply and development of technology uh, by the private sector? It is the combination of these two which I believe is going to help India kind of make the leap from becoming from being a very taking the baby steps to making those giant leaps. So yeah, that's where I'd like to stop at this point of time.
Thank you, Krishnan sir. And now the panel is open for discussion. My first question would be to Professor Saxena. The question is that when we talk about these big uh, uh, private firms like Lockheed Martin or Boeing, their journey towards being so-called aviation giants, what is the reason behind that? Why they are termed as aviation giants, and what has helped them? What is the thing that they have done right? Although they are private, but what is that they have done right, which distinguishes them from other private firms?
You see, first of all, moving further to what Mr. Krishan has said, that it is the private sector which can bring in efficiency. And that helps. But the second thing that he has said, I don't know, we will be discussing it about the right incentives. I don't know what is the kind of incentives that he has got in his mind, because I think it is only the incentives which have destroyed the industry in India. They only live on incentives and not on competitive development. Coming back to this question of what made Boeing's and Lockheed Martin as the great companies developing system after system. Again, you see, first thing is, if we go back to say 50s, when India chose public sector and France went in for the private sector, it is because the ecosystem which is required for the private sector, the kind of challenges that one faced during these developments, which was known to the industrialized nation, they were used to it, and so they went ahead with it. Over here, I would also like to say that, look, let us look at it, for example, the space sector. During, say, 60s until very recently, it was NASA which was doing everything, even in USA. They were the pioneers. and they were progressing it. So because when we talk about this cutting edge technology, there is so much to be done as far as the development of technology itself is concerned. So much of design, development, and industrial research. Mind you, I'm talking about industrial research, not so much about the theoretical research, that a company cannot have that long a vision to do it. I mean, unless you are, say, for example, a communist country, then that's a different thing. But in a democratic country, so at that stage, invariably a public sector kind of or a, approach is required. But now, if you see today, even NASA is looking after, say, for example, Elon Musk and say Jeff Bezos and the others to develop a efficient industry, and they also feel that it can be done. But the whole ecosystem is to be built around it. And the question is now what we mean by ecosystem. Ecosystem is not just handing over to private, because if this is what India is going to do, we are going to fail. It's a question of how we develop the subsidiary industry, what are the laws, what are the policies, etc. that we make. Incentives are there only as far as, say, placement of some orders are concerned. But otherwise, if you say, well, look, they are being given other incentives, I don't know what kind of incentives they are being provided to them. And obviously, because they made systems efficiently, they could sell it at a competitive price. They could improve the technology for the sake of money. You see, money is a big driver. So when you are chasing for it, you develop because you have to survive in a private sector. I mean, it's not like India that if something fails that we have to go to the government, go just save us. And that hunger took them to develop more and more system. And that's how they have become so big and so efficient. They have to be, see, the whole thing in America is that unless they innovate and they are ahead, they are nowhere. They are not, they will be nowhere. So that is the spirit with which has to be built in, even in our system, even in our private system. Only then it will work. You see, when Tata Systems, in fact, came up, say, a few years back, in fact, Ratan Tata had taken a good step. For a number of years, he was the director in HAL. And then he started this system simultaneously. But still, I don't know. I mean, Krishnan will be knowing better, and he will be able to tell us that how much Tata Systems has progressed. And what are the sort of reasons why they have not been able to do well. So that is one. Second, as far as defense is concerned, there is one more problem, which is there, very big problem, that unless you are backed and you are able to research it to the latest sort of standards, you cannot be asked. So suppose if we, again, as we said, that if, say, your adversaries have got better system than what you have got, then that our systems are of no use. See, in, for example, our war with, say, Pakistan, we had NATs and they had Starfighter F-104, which was slightly superior to ours, but our NAT was nowhere near to it. So if this fine Starfighter is coming, they will try to run away. And only in one case they could bring it down. Something similar to, say, we could do it as far as our, say, recent skirmishes with Pakistan was concerned. So, when ASR, air staff requirements, they are formed, obviously they want the latest systems. Only then it is of use to them. And that too in time limits. Otherwise, the better systems have come, the old system they have got they are of no use. So as far as say Pratej's point over here was concerned, that both Boeing's and say Lockheed Martin could do it because they had hunger for the new technology and they were in private, and so they could do it in a more efficient manner. There are no such, say, incentives which are there. Rather, they are only disincentives as far as US is concerned. You can't sell to them, you can't sell to them, you can't sell to them, and you can't sell to them. This is what I know. Maybe Mr. Krishnan will be knowing a little better and we can hear from him.
Yeah. Uh, can I? Yeah. So, thank you, Professor Saxena. So, the incentives that I'd just like to take a couple of recent examples with regards to explain with regards to what I was referring to with regards to incentives. So, there are like a couple of public-private joint projects that were happening between with the DRDO in collaboration. One is, I believe, the Tata Kestrel, which is a wheeled armored personal carrier, and other is the uh, Bharat Forge's ATAGS, Advanced Towed Artillery Gun System. In both the cases, the private sector had put in its own share of its money and effort into the design and development of the system, and is still waiting for a go ahead from the government with regards to any kind of funding or any kind of orders. I think you are very familiar, sir, with regards to the incentives, and you had very well explained how the incentive system works in the US. If we are to anywhere close to get our private sector to come to that kind of a level, I think the private sector would expect some kind of predictability or risk capital that the government would make available for the private sector to get into, in terms of either research and development or in terms of manufacturing. uh, you very well explained how Lockheed Martin and Boeing had developed so much with their spirit of always trying to seek a better products, and trying to develop their technology every year, like over throughout the Cold War era as well as the post Cold War era. And that is really true, and much of it much of that requirement or incentive to kind of seek a better technology year after year also comes from the government funding, right? The DoD has a the Department of Defense of the US has like more than $100 billion of budget every year just for research and development, and that not only goes for their government agencies for research. It also funds the majority of private sector research, whether it is Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman or Boeing. Uh, so, if such an incentive and competition to be able to get those projects and show results, and an open system is allowed for the Indian private sector, Indian public sector, and Indian academia, where the IITs can also come in and provide their expertise and can work together to develop systems uh, which need not be necessarily be loss making for the private sector, because without any predictability of orders or any kind of co-funding from the government, I don't think any private sector would be interested into getting into research and development or gaining manufacturing capability that would be able to cater to the aerospace and defense system. So uh, with regards to the Tata Advanced Systems, I think Tatas have made some amount of progress, but I do agree that there is a lot to be desired when it comes to overall the private sector, as to how much they have geared up to the level of public sector with regards to honing up their capabilities. But my overall point is there would need to be a lot of hand holding from the government, whether it is with regards to funding or with regards to affording other resources for the private sector to be able to be complementary to the public sector in being or some of the best tier one suppliers so that the public sector can be the system of system integrators.
I think I would also agree with both Professor Vinod Saxena and Krishnan. There are two things which have come out very clearly. One is that innovation has to be driven, and there has to be a sense of urgency to drive the innovation. And if we, as I said, we will do the way we do it. There's no need of emulating the incentive-based system of the US or any European country. The best way forward would be that we straight away go for increase of our defense budget from 0.7% now to about 2%, and immediately start putting those funds into the DRDO funded second tier universities. I mean, that is how we can get. There's a lot of such things are happening in a very unofficial manner, or I would say in an official manner, but in a very minuscule scale, that the private sector is participating with the DRDO and they are creating innovations. And WEM technology is one of them, which was able to come out with the Nag missile. And Tata Advanced System, as such, that point that came up, they have the sense of urgency, but there is no innovation that is coming up. It is most of though Ratan Tata ji has tried to infuse fuel cell technologies and other new things to come up as a innovation, but most of the main money earner there in Tata Advanced Systems is basically built to print. The F-16 airframe and the Sirkozy aircraft helicopter things. Being in Tata's for about 8 years, I found that they have a very good sense of urgency and a system setup which actually promotes sense of urgency. They have got a good way of taking on standards. And I would like to just put in a few words on standards. What we are trying to do is that we take a CMMI 5 or any of those ISO standards or any of those other standards which are supposed to be emulated, or documentation standards that are supposed to be done. And we just try to implement it in a brute force method. That is not the way forward. We have not been trained for it. There is so much of time wasted in documentation. Now, for example, recent rules which have come out on drones, they cut out so much of red tape that you quickly can become a R&D company and then quickly start becoming a manufacturing company. Now, that is the kind of synergy required for changing our red tapeism which is existing. Just take a Western rule and implement it, and you become a ISO company or a CMMI company, and then most of the RFPs start saying that you have to follow this ITUT standard and that ITU standard. There is a Bharat standard which has been existing for such a long time. Why don't we use that? Let us do it our way. So my take on this is that all these major ingredients are existing within our country. What we intend to do is, or what we should intend to do is that the governance, we should bring in good governance, like it has happened in case of the drone industry. We should bring in a sense of urgency that we are spending so many billions of dollars which are going outside the country. Let us save it. Let us put it within the country. I mean, if the DRDO budget is increased, and that budget goes to the Indian universities, it will ultimately come back to us, because the students who are going to the foreign countries to gain experience, they will have wonderful labs set up in India itself. We will be saving a lot of our youths who can contribute to innovations, and there are wonderful. We have got wonderful mindsets, beautiful kind of minds which are existing within the country, which we can use. So that is my take on it. And lastly, I would, before finishing on this part, I would say that man behind the machine. Professor just alluded to it in a short form. So NATs, which were there during the war with Pakistan, we were able to succeed with the NATs because our pilots were well trained. So the man behind the machine, the training itself is a very important factor, which nobody actually thinks about. They say, okay, we have made the equipment, we have given it, okay, we have equipment and we have this kind of army, we have so much strong. No, that's not so. We have Rafales, we have some of the best submarines, but then Krishnan will be aware about some of the accidents which have happened in the nuclear submarine also, which was because of the skill sets which were not there at that point of time. And slowly we built upon it, and now we are a manufacturing nuclear submarine manufacturing and a operating country. And there are there are two more such nuclear submarines lined up for production and this. So my conclusion would be for this part that we increase our GDP towards the defense, and we give more to the Indian universities through a well-programmed method, that we get innovation out of them, which are implementable, and bring it out into the defense. Because ultimately, what is to happen 5 or 10 years hence is what we have to produce now. As professor was initially saying, you cannot take a technology which is already outdated. So for doing 5 to 10 years ahead, you have to focus on quantum, we have to focus on AI, we have to focus on so many other things, advanced materials, self-healing materials. So there are a whole list of things for which small universities, I'm telling you, Shastra University in South India, Thiruvananthapuram, Thanjavur, sorry. Then Anna University. You talk about any of the IITs, they have got wonderful innovation centers. But most of these innovations come out to a certain level and they die off. They are not able to see the light of the day. Thank you.
In fact, I would like to. I mean, I fully agree with Mr. Krishnan that government has to fund for the new technology development. And in fact, I'm forgetting the name. In fact, I was trying to recollect. There is already a board. Mr. Krishnan, Mr. Mishra, Lieutenant Colonel Mishra may be knowing about it. I'm forgetting the name. That ARDB board or something is there, which is meant only for funding technology development, and it is available to both public as well as private, including
You're talking about
universities.
IDEX?
Huh?
IDEX? IDEX?
No, it is. I mean, I'm forgetting the name of the board. It is something ARDB or some board is there
Okay.
for aviation purposes. That board is meant only to fund the. I mean, you have to submit the project to them, and it's only for technology development, and they fund you for the technology development. Obviously, they will ask for some reports and all that. But those funds are available, and I think government is increasing over there, because even to universities now for research, I don't think there is a dearth of fund in any university. Only thing is you have to put up a good project, and they are there to fund it. So funding is increasing, and this is one way of, in fact, encouraging the sector to take up the development of new technology. Because as you have rightly said, even in US, when we talk about, say, for example, Boeing and there's Lockheed Martin and many other companies, they will take up the development projects. And these kind of technology development projects, and those projects are funded, liberally they are funded by the government, so that and the only thing is, when you are taking government fund, you have to declare your results to in open. It doesn't remain a company secret. So it depends upon how company wants to do it. It is for them. So initial research of basic research, they are carrying out new technologies with government fund, and then somewhere, some part of it, they will take it and do it in a private manner, where they don't want to share the results. So it depends upon the project, and that funding is done. It is available in India also. I'm forgetting. I think it is called ARDB projects. ARDB. but name may be slightly different. It is available. It was available right from say 80s itself.
For example, some of the private companies that I have been working with in the past few years, what I found is that IDEX or a similar ARDB fund, it gives you about 2 crores of incentive for developing a technology and giving the entire know-how to the industry, to the defense. Now, there that is the place where most of these what happens is that companies they back out and they don't want to contribute because putting in years of investment and then giving their entire know-how to the government, it appears too much within that two crore rupees. 2 crore rupees is the limit as of now. But what I would like to recommend here is that we give a larger sum. Like 2 crores is, I will tell you, we developed a messaging system, a um, encrypted messaging system for the defense ministry. And we spent about 3 crore rupees in Tata's just doing the development part of it. So now that 3 crore rupees doesn't adjust to any place. We have to get some business in order to amortize that, and we cannot amortize that right away. I mean, in a single deal, it will be amortized across, let's say, 10 or 20 such sales. Now that kind of a thing, government is not. I would say it is aware about it, but it is not giving it enough of a thrust that if a how to calculate the amount of efforts that goes into creating an innovation. That was my moot point that I had put across to the vice chief also during the current chief when he was the vice chief during a CIA meet. That sir, there is a problem that we need to actually upfront recognize that once we conceptualize a project, we firstly don't know what is the core technology. That core technology, how to identify that this core technology is Indian. The how do they do it? I'll tell you. I was in Tata, so we were giving something to the ministry, and some financial experts came. They just segregated everything that was procured in dollars, yen, and euros, and they made that as the foreign content, and rest of it was Indian content. Now, a lot of it was through dealers who were paid in rupees, but the technology was foreign. So, a lot of procurement was done that way. Now, here, if you see, there is no effort made to understand. In the DAP 2020, they had come out with a clause that there'll be T1 and a L1 concept, in which the T1 part of it, there'll be a board of directors, a board of specialists who will decide as to what is the core technology going into a project. And once the core technology is decided, then weightages will be given to it. It will not be a simple number game of dollars and euros and yen. There'll be weightages given to it as this much of it has been developed in India. And most of the time, the core technology, only the upper layer is developed in India, which is customization part of it. And rest of it is actually as is. You just take it as is. And under a TOT, you take the TOT, you don't tinker around with that code because that has been tested and stabilized over a period of time. So that is the method by which we are operating, which we'll have to change.
I don't know the limits as far as these ARDP projects are concerned. I think it may be within, I mean, if high tech is giving, say, 2 crores, maybe they have also put in the, 2 crores as the limit. So, I mean, perhaps that is one thing that they need to increase from 2 crores, maybe to 100 crores to, put it in a right manner. And as I understand, it also depends upon how you break up your whole project. Instead of taking one project, if you put it up as a number of projects, then for each thing you get something. Say, for example, say you have to carry out the metallurgical, say, analysis, and you want the electron scanning and microscopes and things like that. So you do it for a particular project and get it. Okay, and then it is, in fact, what they say, it is their property, but they don't take it away from you. So it remains in your premises and you are using it and you have mastered the technology also. I mean, and similarly, so, I mean, these projects perhaps need to be broken down in today's scenario. Uh, so, and I think it will depend upon the type of technology which is required to be developed. Surely, I mean, this is an area which requires a sort of a streamlining and seeing that what is the output that we are going to get. But technology, whatever you are getting, that's the reason I said, okay, look, there is a, see, I think anywhere else, it is the building part for which the government will not pay. Even in universities, when they are giving equipment, building university has to provide. All the equipment which goes over there comes, under the project. And of course, you have got the project engineers and things like that, whose salary for that particular period will be accounted for. So, how much should be the funding? That is to be seen. Yes, that is required, very much required by the private industry, because as we had said earlier, that if they are not doing the latest things, then nobody requires their technology. So that's a good point brought in by Krishnan, and well, I think this is the way forward. Second, of course, you see, is as I was saying, that there is a complete ecosystem which is required to be, built up. Say, for example, if we are talking about, say, aeronautical industry, I think before nautical industry, I would like to give you an example of, say, how Leyland, for example, was doing it for their, all their, say, suppliers. Because, you require material, you want the tested material to be over there so that, you are able to get the quality output. And the question is, from where it has to come and how it can come. So Leyland, what they did was that virtually they were carrying out the whole testing and doing the grading of the batches. And these industries, when they have to buy their small requirement, they need not ask, but they will only go to that supplier and take it from that particular batch. So that way it was being helped out. For a nautical industry, I know that when it comes to, for example, raw materials and bought-out items, whether it is electronics or it is materials or other things, just because it is required to be a nautical grade, so-called, it becomes a big headache and, a lot of effort required by the industry to get those materials, and they get it at a cost. And then the cost is not competitive. So what government need to, we have to see it is in the ecosystem is what is building up the cost as far as the industry is concerned. And then if some outside factors are there, then how those outside factors are to be controlled so that they get the material at the cost, for example, at which they are getting in any Western country. Because only then you can think of that they can produce items which are competitive. Otherwise, it is difficult to assume that they can produce item in a competitive manner. The second thing is, of course, it comes to things like calibration, which you tend to neglect. And they are important part of it. And if our systems are not, say, equipment as well as the system, they are not tuned for doing it efficiently, they will add up to the cost. And without calibration, of course, when it comes to dealing with, say, microns and things like that, it becomes difficult. Third, of course, is the systems itself, the human factors which are taken into consideration and the complete system of recording and making sure that how technology is to be developed, that is to be learned. And I think in that, say, what government is trying to do is to give the management control itself now with majority shares in defense industry with the private sector, that they can bring in their systems and try to develop something with an aim when they are coming that they are going to export, because at least they cannot export unless it is of right quality and right price. So some changes and build-up of ecosystem is required so that private sector can take up. That is for sure, that in case we have to do it efficiently, we have to move over slowly to the, I mean, slowly or fast to the private sector. Only then we can expect that we will be competitive in the world.
I'd like to add to what Professor Saxena had said. I agree with almost everything that he has said here. Uh, with regards to creating that ecosystem, what I would like to add is right now, for a variety of reasons, whether it is with regards to regulatory approvals or whether it's regards to the way the procurement of defense equipments or the way the entire defense ecosystem works. Um, Although there is a vibrant and but at a very minuscule level, there is a facility by the government wherein the startups can enter and kind of take up projects either with the help of DRDO or directly on their own using government funding. I think the right scale is important, in my opinion, for the right kind of product, right? For a tier one kind of a subsystem, we can't really expect a startup to kind of build the entire system. In the same way, for example, like a really small subcomponent of a tier one subsystem, we really can't expect a large private player to come in and take up that project. So what we would need, in my opinion, is companies at multiple levels, startups, MSMEs, SMEs, all of them, for them to enter in a big way, not just to wait for the government's offsets or a technology transfer deal as part of a larger project or part of what DRDO annually or biannually shares the license for the private sector to take up manufacturing of some of the commercially viable technologies, and to go beyond it, and then for the entire government system to be open and welcoming for the SMEs and MSMEs to take up corresponding, how do I put it, intellectual real estate or technological real estate at various levels. So for that, there needs to be, what do I call, like, right now our MSMEs focus on the manufacturing aspect of which, to which Colonel Mishra and Professor Saxena spoke about, with regards to adhering to some international standards, which we cannot really jump in immediately, and with regards to how we just do a copy paste and we do not really spend time on absorbing the base technology or the fundamental technology within. So for that to kind of like, how do I put it, for that company to actualize the technology, then we need to focus on developing not just SME manufacturing ecosystem but also SME design ecosystem. Now that would require some kind of a space creation by the government itself, and also some kind of a revolving door between the public sector as well as the private sector, so that the experts who are there in the public sector, like in the defense public sector, engineers and scientists who have decades of experience having worked in the public sector system, can either work in a joint venture basis or can come in and take up projects on a contract basis and help develop the ecosystem in the private sector to kind of accomplish the objectives that is set by the government for the aerospace and defense ecosystem. Because much of our current private sector is essentially for supplying to the Indian public, and the Indian public is essentially a very cost sensitive environment. So the private sector is almost always used to developing, uh, taking a path of optimizing for the least cost, not for the maximum quality necessarily. Of course, there are exceptions in each and every case. So, for us to change that mindset for our private sector to move not just to stick to the path of low cost, but also to the path of maximum quality, it would require a lot of I'm looking for the right word. um, it would require a lot of it would require a lot of exchanges between the services, because it is the services at the end of the day who are going to set up these staff quality requirements, and there, and which can be kind of translated for the private sector by the engineers and scientists in the public sector who are already familiar with the stringent standards of the services, and guide the private sector to be able to get up to a culture where achieving those high quality and high precision becomes a part of a culture, rather than doing it for the sake of getting some orders from the government. That's my 2 cents.
You see, there are a few things. In fact, I thought that you are coming to, I mean, Mr. Kishan is coming to that area. He is slightly perhaps when he will elaborate. See, as far as aeronautical industry is concerned, there is a queer sort of a situation. Aeronautical industry can progress only if we start manufacturing the civil aircraft and the civil systems. And what we are dealing with is we want to establish it with respect to defense system. So there is a DGCA for civil and DGAQA for military, purposes. For aircraft purposes. And they are going in their own direction, with the result that this kind of system, when we talk about this ecosystem and all that, the harmonization of all these systems are very much required. And because I don't know, Mr. Krishnan may not have faced, but you see, DJQ has got its own way of working, which is good for, it was very good for earlier days, but now it may require a little bit of change with changing times, with passing on of the responsibilities and to the private sectors. Laws also have to be in line with it, because it's not that a company can get away with supplying a wrong part, which is not going to give the service. So, that is one area where government has to think about it, that how to simplify things for private sector to come in. Otherwise, the moment there is anything which is being manufactured, even the private sector, suppose it is a major item, a big contingent of these DGA fellows will be stationed over there. And so that's not the way to manage it as such. We have to see that how FAA is managing with such a huge number of industry and the turnover in FAA, still maintaining the quality and still making, say, industry feel, not only feel, but they have to produce quality. Otherwise, they can be wiped off in a day if they make a blunder. So, those kind of changes in the ecosystems, they are required. Sir, as far as standards are concerned, you are talking about LCA, that LCA, we have got a very good record. But you also might be knowing that ADA only maintained one thing, that nothing doing, we have got to follow the international standards and basically the mill standards for their equipment and for their this thing. And that is one of the reasons why they have been able to achieve this kind of reliability that they have got today. Now again, as Mr. Krishan brought it out, to come up to the standard, perhaps government should allow for the projects for the industry to see that how they can come to that standard. But saying that it should come gradually is something which is killing India for the past, say, 70, 75 years. Oh, we are not up to that standard, so let us go a little slow, let us do in our own manner. How to develop it? The standard is there. We have got to, do it. Let us do it. I'll like to give you an example over here. If we talk about, say, for example, these solar panels and the solar electricity, you know it very well that solar only produces DC. Okay, then this DC is to be converted into AC through inverters. So as far as, say, if, for example, if you've got a inverter in your house, you will notice that whenever the power goes off and the inverter comes on, your fan starts making humming noise. I don't know how far you have observed, or if you have got a good perhaps inverter, you may not find it. Otherwise, it is invariably it is there. You get some kind of humming noise. That humming noise is nothing but that the waveform is not good, and it affects the your equipment. It means a wastage of power. Now, for inverters, ISE has brought in international standards that this is the minimum quality of inverter which should be there. Now, we may say, look, we are not good enough, let us not follow the international standards, but then we are wasting a lot of energy, which we are producing through solar panels. So, that is why I feel that perhaps an attempt should be made to give projects to make sure that the products that we are making, they follow the international standards and then follow that. Rather than taking a softer view of let us try to manage with the standards which are not up to the mark. Because after all, if they have made the standards, it is because as far as it is because they are the minimum requirements, as they say, to make the product safe and reliable. It's not the sort of a maximum thing which is there. It is the minimum thing, even in other things. That is why, as the normal thing is that they say that if when Americans ask for some mill standard to be applied to some of the diodes that they have to supply, so they supplied good diodes and then they gave a bunch of bad diodes to look to bring it to your quality. These are the bad ones that we have to add to it. So, those things are there. Yes, we are not there. Let us, recognize it. But how to reach there is the sort of a initiative that industry will have to take it if it has to become, competitive. And again, what we say, for example, we are saying that we are supplying it over to only to the Indian one. Let's take, for example, Bharat Forge. Bharat Forge is supplying to the international quality to world over, all over, including the aerospace industry in the outside world. So it's a question of mindset that is required to be changed as far as the private industry is concerned. Second is facilitation, as you have rightly said. The facilitation is by the government to make sure that, yes, to reach to those standards, even the production facilities, the kind of, what is required for production. Again, as far as production is concerned, I've got a lot of examples, so I love to give some examples, You see, when this Gillette was trying to develop their 2 blades and 3 blades, shaving, their design and development bill was $1 billion for it. What for? Just to make sure that how it is can be produced in mass where it is required. not for developing that, I mean, the blade as such, but for production technology. I know about NGL that they use, see, normally we are doing lapping on the top surface, but they developed a design where lapping was to be done in a flat surface within a hole. So before taking up into design, they have to sort of prove that technology or develop that technology first before taking it up. And for these, again, the projects, they should be allotted with the necessary funding so that independently the private industry can take up these kind of development projects before they are able to use it into their system. So I mean, these were some of the sort of. The second is, of course, if we really see, if we are talking about the facilities that the public-private facilities, then I think that automobile is a good example. Where at Pune and at many other places, they have established the big testing facilities for vehicles. And so, and those facilities can be rented out. And they are in fact rented out to the, private players. They buy the time and they carry out their testing during those. So those kind of partnerships can come up, and those are the part of the ecosystem which is to be built up. But I still feel that the answer is only to go to privatization rather than now at this stage. You see, in 50s, as we said, nobody was there to pump in that much of money, or technology also was not there. But today, private sector has got technology almost over there. So top it up by the projects and let them take it over further so that we are abreast. Say, for example, the way that we are abreast as far as the software is concerned. At least the, say, cheaper version, say, for example, that's why we have got Wipros and Infosys and TCS and things like that. So this is what I feel what needs to be done.
Now taking forward, as Vinod Saxena sir pointed out about privatization, my next question is to Lieutenant Colonel Mishra. Sir, Indian government keeps talking about privatization, and recently this term has become like very famous. But what can be actually done so that we can ensure that its actual implementation is practical? Because we keep hearing that government will privatize everything. It is not practical. So, what steps can be taken so we can ensure that privatization is a practical thing?
I think we can follow the ISRO model. Professor had mentioned space program also slightly before his current session. So in ISRO, the way they achieved the Antariksh was the private partnership that they had. And there are a lot of ISRO projects in which private companies have been involved. And now even satellites are being made by private companies, including universities. So the ISRO model is something that is to be emulated. In 1983, if you can imagine, if Dr. Abdul Kalam could create the SLV-3 and successfully launch it without any failure. So there is something that is there in ISRO which probably we have missed out, or probably we have not gone into the lessons learned, or there are a few things that innovation is natural in ISRO. I have visited ISRO a number of times. I have met their same people like you and me, and but what I found the difference in their attitude was they had that sense of urgency. I have to do it. I have to do it quickly, and that sense of urgency is built in around a culture, and organizational culture actually comes up by leadership. And during Abdul Kalam's time, during Dr. Sarabhai's time, those leaderships were there. So suppose if you ask me that what is the shortest way to create a public-private kind of a consortium which starts delivering, then the best way is to get the right leadership there. And we should not be, impinged upon it by age factor, by that he's a retired guy, he's this guy, he's that guy. You get the right leadership in place, and you see how it starts shining out.
Yes, Mishra Sahab has rightly said, basically it is the leadership. And what is meant by, what is coming to leadership is the focus. And the focus remains over a period. Not that you have just said it today and then you don't even think about it and then leave it. So that thing is, is not going to work. Otherwise, say for example, as we talk to the students, take up a project. Just imagine widely and go for it. It's not that the students, when they come up, then for the first time, they have got something which is workable. No, there are hundreds of things about which they don't know. And we know that, look, if they only go like this, they will fail. But because of their energy, they are having that passion and they keep on thinking about it. They look for the opportunities, they keep on adding to it, and then that builds up. So this is what, in fact, any leadership, perhaps this is my feeling, is this is what they do. So long as they have got a objective and a focus and a principled focus, a principled objective, and they keep on thinking about it, then these ideas, they will sort of keep on coming, and they are the ones who will sift out and do it. So leadership is very important. And it was only in that sense, in fact, that I brought in the topic of this defense production versus the civil aircraft manufacturing. Because this sector is coming under civil aviation ministry as far as civil manufacturing is concerned, but our aircraft industry we want to develop for defense. So virtually it is no one's baby to see that we produce something which sells in the world market as far as civil aircraft is concerned, and focus on that at the top leadership, that look, this is a synergy which is required, will perhaps boost these sectors.
So let's move on with the discussion further. And I have a question to all the panelists, and then follow-up discussions can happen. I think we have gone a lot far in the panel, and it has been, I think, very much guided by the panelists themselves, which we appreciate. So my question is on India's growing manpower, as to how it can transform the aerospace sector, given the fact that we know that we have a very young workforce, and that surplus of workforce, which is very young in India in this particular decade, might help us a lot. We know that there is amazing talent which is available, and we can utilize them accordingly. Adding to that, I would like to put out a comment which was given by Dr. Sumanta Matra. So Dr. Matra is from the University of Nottingham. He works in defense and international relations, and he pointed out a proposition that if you have IITs, Mahindra and Tata, why don't you have a military industrial complex like the United States? So if that's the case, why do we not have it? So these two questions I'm now putting up to the panelists, and now the panelists can converse. So Pratejas, you can take it up.
Can I? Shall I go first?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Or you can go ahead, Professor.
No, please. Let us hear from you. Otherwise, I may be affecting you otherwise.
So, so the two questions, right? Like, one is, how do we harness our talent and other is like, if we have our IITs and Mahindra and Tata, why do we not have a military industrial complex? So I think they are tied to each other. I'll start with the first and then move on to the second. One of the things that I've been talking about personally a lot, and which is in very dire need of focus from the government as well as a lot of others who are involved in the education sector, is that our engineering curriculum and what they teach in our colleges, except maybe for the IITs, is pretty much outdated. It is not relevant to what is required for the industry today, leave alone what is required for the industry tomorrow, for which we have to work on to develop the technologies. Even in a world of electronic control systems, MEMS and other kind of modern electronics based control systems, we still are stuck. Our engineering education is still stuck with very outdated concepts, like very old versions of hydraulic systems. And then with regards to the way the subject is being taught, that also makes our talent coming out of college just a memory chip that contains the knowledge, rather than as a practicing engineer out of the college. Part of the reason is we rather seem to emphasize too much on coursework rather than on hands-on projects. Even as our colleges have, engineering colleges have moved towards projects, there is a lot of, the way these projects have been adjudicated, the way they have been evaluated, the way they are being conducted, leaves a lot to be desired. And there is a need for proliferation of good lab facilities with focus on good quality lab equipments that are relevant to today's industry, that need to come up in our engineering colleges. And that is going to come up only when the private sector is going to tie up with the engineer, with the education sector, so that both of them can mutually benefit from it. It would be I mean, it would be better for the private sector to be able to have a talent whom they can put on live projects immediately out of college, rather than having to train them for the first 9 to 12 months and then be able to put them on projects. So for the first and most important thing is for us to upgrade our education system. And the second part is, with regards to this, also ties into the question of, since we have IITs, why are we not as good as some of the other military industrial nations? It is the IITs, much of their name, I mean, even though they are really good at higher education and higher R&D, much of the IIT's brand has been built on the kind of undergraduate talent that comes out of the IIT system. And we very well know that much of that talent goes away from core engineering sectors. Either they move abroad, or they move to financial, or back to IT again, where the pay is really high. So we are not really harnessing the full potential of the kind of talent that is coming out of IITs. And the reason for that is, there is a world of difference between the quality of masters and PhD and postdoctoral research that happens in some of these advanced countries, compared to the kind of research that happens in our IITs. Some of the IITs, in some labs, they are able to match up to the standards of the West, but as a whole ecosystem, at a research level, or at a level where the universities would be able to determine the paradigm of technologies, we are still decades away from what these advanced countries have in terms of the research ecosystem. So for a Mahindra or for Tata or for IITs itself to work on it, they have to work on those kind of high quality projects, and the kind of research output that comes out of these universities, as well as the research output that comes out of these companies, they need to be appreciated, they need to be incentivized, and they need to be valued up. So even today, in a lot of large companies in India, the it is the cost person who gets promoted, the person who focuses on reducing costs, the person who focuses the finance guy will get promoted much easier. The incentive for a technical guy to be able to innovate and be appreciated by the organization remains low. So even this culture also has to change within the system. A technical guy must be able to have a career path in a private organization where he can rise up by purely because of his technological achievements to the company and be able to come up to the pinnacle of that particular organization. For that, the organizations themselves need to become a technically oriented and be proud of being a technologically advanced organization. Now, that requires a huge amount of culture change, and that kind of a culture change will only come when the focus, when the entire system all around it, including the academia, including the end user, everyone values the premium of quality over cost. I'll stop here.
You see, my own feeling is that we talk about, say, IITs are so good because the students who are going over there, they are so good. As far as the undergrad coaching is concerned, I don't think there is much of a difference in course curriculum or other thing between the other colleges and the IITs. Sincerity varies. I mean, if you ask for perhaps a student to read before coming to class, he will do much better. He will be better prepared so that he can, a lot of things can be covered. Yeah, I mean, and very rightly, Kishan has pointed out that you see, it is in today's scenario, it is the finance chap and the non-technical chap who enjoy the life and the rise, whether it is a CA or it is a finance chap or it is a lawyer or anything. Part of it is maybe that we have we are still believing in licensed manufacturing so far. Not much of our own innovations, because we have not even reached that level of competing with the world. So unless we think of, we try to come to that standard. Earlier, what you were saying was very correct, that to develop to the technology, there should be free-flowing sort of a project so that each company is able to come to the international standards. But unless there is a cost competition and there is a quality competition, and you know that, look, because you are producing the best, so you can't have technology from outside. You got to develop it. You have to survive. That is why the private companies at these places, they survive, and they can survive only if they innovate. They cannot survive otherwise. From where they will get, say, for example, Boeing will get a design under license from someone. They can't get it. And so they have to be at the cutting edge of the technology. And that is always, there, that we have to see that how we come to a stage where the technocrats are also equally recognized. And for that, maybe that even technocrats, you see, also have to understand that they are not living in silos. It's a complete system, and to the side things, they must be, appreciative of the other things also which are going on. But it is very much required that technologies have to be, there's so much of emphasis going on that, see, we are talking about technologies to be done. Even the design and development section is not there in most of the industries. So where is the question of doing it? And if you really see that the kind of work that they are doing, an engineer, when he is there in a shop floor, except for counting numbers, especially in public sector, he is not doing much. Either he is doing a little bit of coordination or otherwise. So it is only his sincerity which is being used over there. IIT grabs up, but so it's still a, I mean, perhaps this requires more thinking how to build up this culture and this thought that, well, if we have got the IIT fellows and if we have got the, say, I mean, Tatas and Birlas, then why are we lacking? It's a good thing, and that is why we are saying that, look, the industry should go to private, I mean the defense industry, because then they will be looking for efficiency, and to look for efficiency they will ultimately have to go back to that. Just for your question, your this thing, you see, in 60s and 70s, the best of minds from IIT, they were going to ISROs and some of these top level sort of a thing. Now they are not going, and as you have rightly said, that even in technology, even amongst them, the person who rises is one that who is not good perhaps in his say technical field or innovative field. So he built up a sort of a group, kind of, he tried to build up a, I mean, connections, so that, you know, I mean, he is not affected by his say lack of knowledge and the skills. That thing is there, but more so, and I think that in private, perhaps ultimately, if they are depending upon that technologist to deliver the results for them, they will be respecting the technologist.
My take on this two topics. Firstly, we have got world's best manpower as far as software is concerned. And if you look at the world, the hardware technologies, though the US claims that they create hardware technologies, but most of them come from the Nordic countries, Netherlands, then the Sweden, Norway, and parts of northern Germany, and the software core which is written on top of it. That comes from the US, and then the secondary research, which Professor calls as design and development. That's the correct terminology. We are not doing research and development; we are doing design and development. So the customization of the software core is done by our students over here. Are they not capable of doing the core technology? No, that's not so. I've got a number of people from my previous organizations who have joined these Nordic country universities. They have created the five level designs of the 5G network, and they are now creating the core network also. So we have got the capabilities. Only thing is our labs are lacking. Our labs do not have, let's say, for example, I'll tell you, we don't have a 40 gigahertz or a 100 gigahertz oscilloscope or that kind of a thing inside. You count out any lab in India. IIT Kanpur was the first lab to get embedded carbon fiber printer, 3D printer, due to which they were able to accelerate their drone development. Now, these are, you can count on your fingers. So we are not very applied. Most of the professors, they complain. This is the first thing that because in Tata's we used to have a lot of industry and university cooperation, and most of the professors used to complain that we don't get hands-on onto the applied part of it. We have got a lot of mathematics, we know a lot of physics, but how to convert it into applied usage. And they have got hundreds of examples that this can be used here, this can be used there. And way back, about 6 years back, we were trying to develop an AI system for making the communication system, the routing system, function in a more better way. Predictive analytics to detect a failure much before a failure occurs, and over a period of time improve, learn, and use the network in a better way. But we could never bring it on to the applied part. So the applied part is missing, and the ones that comes, and for applied part to come up, we need a lot of investment into the labs, into the universities, and that money is what I initially talked about. That let DRDO or let the Ministry of Defense directly fund these labs. There have been some fundings like 100 crores given to IIT Mumbai, but they are once in a while types. The professor there was very close to the minister, and he was able to get the funding done. But that is not the way it should be. It should be a entire process, and the moment they see a technology that is ready to be harvested, ready to be harvested in the next 5 years or 10 years, they should start putting in those funds, and then it should be unwavering. We have got wonderful planning commission, Niti Ayog, and all those things. We have got some of the best brains over there, and if those people contribute towards these policy level decisions, then I think that is there. About the military industrial complex, now right from the start, Nehru was very adamant on not letting this military industrial, as professor was saying, that we had that aircraft created in house. But right from the start, Nehru was not very keen on getting the military industrial complex in place, because that was a force to reckon with, in the sense that it would create its own politics, its own money, and it will start interfering in the governance of the country. So, as a result, for a long period of time, till I would say till as late as 2014 or 2012, when this Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India or Made in India concept started taking roots, till then we have missed out this opportunity. Now things are coming up in a very, very slow manner. Few of the examples are where DRDO has shared technology with the private industry, and the private industry is productionizing it or manufacturing it. There are few examples, but they're not a kind of standard practices. So these are my 2 cents on the topic.
Uh, so the final question for today's panel is, we all know about the Artemis program, which NASA is doing in collaboration with SpaceX. SpaceX has made significant strides when it comes to research and development, and basically its image as an aerospace organization has increased like tenfold in the past few years. So why can't, like, we have a lot of startups at various universities, like earlier this year, and a startup at IIC Bangalore developed the most cost efficient rocket, 3D printed rocket. So why is ISRO not able to muster confidence in these third party or private organizations like NASA has done? So it is open to all the panelists.
I think it is both ways. The private also has to show that yes, they have got the capability by doing something. Not that suddenly somebody says and say, okay, I can do this, and you give it to him. There is a technology assessment, and then it is given. In case of Elon Musk and SpaceX, they had built up the capability. Only then NASA started giving them the contracts. So it is both ways.
Krishna, you will take on?
Go ahead, Colonel.
Okay, so before NASA, there used to be an organization called as NACA, NACA. And NACA was a smaller organization where you could actually take the head of a rocket in your hands to a different machining shop. You can tell the machining guy that, okay, you have created this hole incorrectly. Please redo it, get it done, and come back. There was not so much of red tapeism involved. Why NASA went into such a lot of red tapeism is for them to analyze, but that is what destroyed NASA. As a result, we were launching rockets at 1/10 the cost, and Elon Musk took on from there. And so we don't we I would say that we have it in us, and the Elon Musk of future is there in ISRO itself. But the point remains: who is the right leader who can actually nurture these people? People like Abdul Kalam, if they are there at the helm of the organization, they can actually get these guys up, and Professor Santhanam, Abdul Kalam, and Vikram Sarabhai. We had wonderful gems of leaderships which were there, who identified the right kind of a talent, and they brought them up. And those are the guys who led us into the Mars mission, into the moon mission. So what I would like to just add over here is that we Artemis is because Elon Musk showed them, and what Elon Musk's philosophy is that you have to fail and fail fast. Who will emulate that philosophy in India? Nobody wants to show their failure. And if you look at the standards 15 to 88, which is engineering, systems engineering standard, there you are meant to give your failures. The engineering standard ensures that you have to declare your failure on an open portal, so that others can learn from it. How will people learn if you don't tell your failures to them? Every time you show them success because you want to get the next bonus. So somehow you have to break from that thing of getting bonuses, getting incentives, like Professor was initially stating, and get into the thing of, okay, I take the responsibility. Everything stops at me, and this is the failure that has happened. And he and every person should be assured that if you declare your failure, nothing is going to go wrong with you.
I think I'd like to take up where the colonel left off. I think recently we are also seeing the way Elon Musk has been doing his Starship program, right? There have been multiple takeoffs and failures, and he really doesn't care. All he cares is learn from the failures as soon as possible and launch the next vehicle within a few weeks. So that risk appetite needs to come first. And where will the risk appetite come from?
And
The
Krishnan,
incentive.
spaceships used to be lined up,
Yes.
SL9, SL10, SL11. I mean, they are standing in front of you in the
Yeah.
queue, that, okay, this guy is to fail, and then I will launch this with software changes.
Yeah.
Wonderful example.
It's a amazing example. Like even while we are discussing about it online, the next Starship would be getting ready to launch in the next couple of weeks or something. So that kind of risk appetite needs to come in within our private sector. And let's not give like let's the silver SpaceX was not a silver bullet that just happened only because of Elon Musk's magic. Like Elon Musk's magic is definitely there, but he was he had access to a lot of NASA's base technologies right from beginning. And he built the reputation of SpaceX over the years, launching heavier and heavier satellites and creating more heavier and heavier engines. Like, I just want to give you a comparison. When you mentioned about the Indian startups, we talk about being able to launch at the lowest cost, a startup being able to come up at the lowest cost. But I think we need to change this optimization function from being able to launch at the lowest cost to being able to launch at the highest quality or at the highest tonnage, or being able to do something technologically superior. That is what we need to focus on. And our space startups, with the kind of initiative that ISRO is showing now, we would be able to achieve what SpaceX is doing probably in a decade's time. I have been part of some of the space startup ecosystems talks, and the entrepreneurs there are very energetic. They are looking forward to more and more ideas and challenges from ISRO. And I think it is a curve. It is a learning curve that our startups will go through. And in my opinion, like I just talk like any other typical private sector guy. There can be n number of policies, there can be n number of reforms. At the end of the day, all of that has to be matched with copious amount of funding. Because the funding is only going to ensure that a private sector guy can fail again and again without having to worry about money. The funding is going to ensure that he can bring in the best of scientists from across the country, without having to leave those talent to go into IT or finance. It is the copious amount of funding that is going to ensure that the private sector is able to build up those test facilities and manufacturing facilities, which are really which really cost a lot of money. So in my opinion, we can make a lot of changes which are all necessary, lot of reforms which are necessary, but the scale at which money is available in that particular sector at the end of the day is going to determine how fast we scale up and how fast we catch up with the rest of the countries.
So, with that, I believe we are coming to the a near end of the discussion. Uh, we as moderators believed that let the panelists have a free flow of discussion so that they discuss various perspectives from Atmanirbharta to competitive strategies to the issue of incentives, and also when we compare the Indian defense sector with those of the Americans. So, we are coming to the conclusion of this third panel of the Global Law Assembly Conference 2021. In just an hour or so, we will come up with the fourth and the last panel of Global Law Assembly Conference 2021. And in that panel, we will be discussing about the Indian education services slash Indian teaching services and the issue of India's knowledge economy. That if we come up with the system again, which was already a Macaulay system, how it should be. Should it be Indic? Should it be neoliberal? What it should be? And what could be the possible research and education reforms that can be done in the same? So I would like to thank Professor Vinod Saxena, Krishnan, and Lieutenant Colonel Prashant Mishra for attending this discussion and accepting our invitation. I would like to thank Pratejas for excellently moderating the session. Really thankful for that. And as this session ends, we will end the live stream shortly, but in 1 hour, nearly we will be live again for the last panel of the Global Law Assembly Conference. And trust me, like this panel has been amazing, people have been discussing, and it has been a great free flow. You are going to enjoy the last panel, which is on knowledge economy and education with an Indian perspective, and of course, on the Indian demographics. So thank you so much for attending the sessions, and please do wait for 1 hour. Go to the conference playlist, go to globallawassemblyorg/conference and click on the broadcast link for the final panel. Thank you so much.